Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a lad with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought an ill report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a long robe with sleeves. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they only hated him more. He said to them, "Hear this dream which I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered round it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us, or are you indeed to have dominion over us?" So they hated him yet more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream, and behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." And when he told it to his father and to his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Now his brothers went to the pasture, their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word again." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, I pray you, where are they pasturing the flock?" And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him afar off, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Cast him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand upon him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore, and they took him and cast him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. When they sat down to eat and looked up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers heeded him. Then the Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he rent his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The lad is gone, and where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and killed a goat and dipped it in the blood. And they sent the long robe with sleeves and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. See now whether it is your son's robe or not." And he recognized it and said, "This is my son's robe. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob rent his garments and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. Do you want me to go directly on to 39?
Yes.
Now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and having him, he had no concern for anything but the food which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome and good looking, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Lo, having me, my master has no concern about anything in his house. He has everything that he has in my hand. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie with her, or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to insult us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment with me and fled and got out of the house. Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to insult me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment with me and fled out of the house." When his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper.
Very good. So you can see why this is one of our passages we're looking at. The repetition, especially of but the Lord was with him, and the Lord made everything that he did prosper, even in those circumstances. Um, I could have possibly stopped you at the end of 37, but uh, well, we'll talk about it here. I wanted to. We will talk about the mentions of how God was with him and how God helped him. Of course, that's the focus. But there was something else that I noticed just in reading, and I've read this. I've read this story many times. But the removal or the stripping of the clothing. So this actually happens twice. He is his brothers take his coat off of him and throw him into a pit. And then later on, Potiphar's wife uh, strips him, and essentially, and then he gets thrown into a pit, a prison. And in both of those instances, he didn't do anything wrong. Um, Now you could say the way he talked to his brothers when he was younger might have been a little bit. He might have had a little more awareness of what he was saying and how they would take that, but and
I
also
would
you
agree with that.
yeah. um and also there is that little detail thrown in about none of the men of the house or none of the other servants were there one day and he went in. um so you could say that that was kind of an opportunity that Potiphar's wife took advantage of in that case. Um, but there's some symbolic significance to these accounts. He's stripped, he's thrown into a pit, or you have that um, descent, and then we didn't touch on this yet, but he will eventually get out of the prison. Um, he's actually from the time he was about 17 when he was sold by his brothers. And it wasn't until he was about 30 years old that he would eventually get. So he was in slavery and then he was in the prison total of about 13 years. But even in the midst of that, even in the human attempts to uh, strip away his favor and the favor that God had for him, and that his identity of who he was,
Mm.
it didn't thwart God's plan. In fact, as we'll see, his place in the prison ended up being the spot where we'll talk about this more next time, but that opened up the opportunity for him to meet these other servants who had a dream, and he ended up interpreting Pharaoh's dream and getting out of the prison, and that set forth a lot of other things in motion that he ended up being the kind of the second in command to Pharaoh. Um, so we have this pattern showing up, and we have this theme of God being with him, even though, and that's kind of the hardest part of this story, really, at least this part. God was helping him succeed, and God was with him, yet he was in the prison, and he was in these difficult circumstances. I mean, probably an understatement. Why is that? I guess that's kind of what why such a long time? Um,
First thing come to my mind is that's what it takes maybe in life to get things done. It takes a long time. But it's not a long time. I mean, it is a long time, but if the one in prison, you cannot tell him that's what it takes because every day counts and every day is more without freedom, without anything, and just it's so painful.
Well,
yeah. Oh, God.
uh, Joseph started out, he was the son who was, kind of denied the start. He was uh, uh, denied uh, uh, of the woman who was denied to his father. Uh, he was of the wife who was denied. He should have been. He should have been early on. Uh, uh, he was of uh, 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 Rebecca, and so he he should have been one of the. He should have been the first child, and instead he was down in the pack because uh, um, his grandfather denied his father having his mother, and so there was that delay in the whole start of his life.
It would have been
And
his great or his great uncle did the switch.
Yeah.
Or no, his uncle. His uncle did the. Yeah, his uncle. Yeah, Laban. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, did the switch, and um, that was a wrong thing. Uh, so he got his life um, started kind of incorrectly, uh, and so he was hobbled out of the gate, and then he, uh, you know, it wasn't it wasn't right that he was given the favoritism that he had in the family. It wasn't right that his father, doted on him the way he was. Uh, but uh, then it wasn't really right that he did the way he performed the way he did over his brothers. Uh, he really shouldn't have done that over his brothers. Um, one thing that I found interesting was that, it really doesn't talk about the robe and its colors.
Hmm.
It talks about the robe and its sleeves.
Oh yeah, your translation talks about the sleeves.
Uh,
Other ones mention the colors.
uh, uh, the Revised Standard talks about its sleeves, and um, the Complete Jewish Bible talk about the sleeves, doesn't talk
Uh,
about the colors, and I found that to be very interesting.
hmm.
And
The Arabic language, it talks about the colors. That's the only thing I heard growing up.
Uh,
ah,
Yes.
uh,
maybe they were colorful sleeves.
That's it could be absolutely, yeah.
and those differences in the way it's taken in the different translations, I just find interesting, and
Mhm.
don't know why. Uh, just don't know why. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, there would be that kind of difference in the translations. Uh,
Now, I hadn't thought about that whole the father's favor angle, and them kind of taking that away. That was a symbol of the coat with sleeves and many colors. Was kind of the symbol of the father's choosing him, favor on him, and you could almost see that God had. We're not really told if Joseph, Joseph was receiving these dreams, so God had given him these dreams, and God the Father had chosen him. Um,
yeah,
we're not told if God chose him because Joseph chose him. Or it probably is the other way around, that God chose him, and Joseph had a sense that this one
yeah,
was special, perhaps. Now his older brothers, 38. If we had read 38, it does kind of show that and what if we can't tell from how they were thinking about killing him, but they felt bad and they sold him into slavery instead. That they weren't the most upstanding uh, people. his older brothers. So out of the mix, he wasn't. He was just a little. He shared a lot about his dreams, and he maybe was a little bit spoiled, you could say, but um, his brothers also kind of underwent a transformation that will become apparent later on in the story. But they did try to remove that identity, from him in a sense. And we will later on, tie this into to Jesus. There's kind of a little bit of a connection there with, uh, when Jesus went to the cross, he was, he was stripped and put up there. And you had the jealousy of the Jewish religious leaders and the
Mm.
all of that.
Yes, bro.
Oh, what's that?
You are right. I never thought of this resemblance in different ways.
And Joseph later on will say, the reason this happened to me was to save the lives of many, which
Mm.
is what we'll look at next time. But of course, God sent His Son Jesus to save many, right? So you have those interesting parallels, and there's just something to this. There's just so much here. I guess that's kind of the the humbling experience that Joseph experienced, kind of like how Jesus was. Now, I'm not saying Jesus was going around like Joseph was when Joseph was young, telling people who he was and all that. But you had this humbling. Joseph was humbled and then he was exalted later, because of course he becomes essentially the equal to Pharaoh. So he was essentially the ruler of Egypt. I did want to ask our resident Egyptologist here about prisons in Egypt in this time. I know it's kind of an unusual thing maybe in the ancient world for there to be a prison, but I don't know if you had any insights on that as far as like what the conditions would have been like. And I guess the translation here, it says prison. I think Joseph later refers to it as a pit.
Yeah.
So probably some kind of underground thing, dungeon, maybe.
You will see, visiting Cairo and Luxor and Aswan, south of Egypt, King Tut tomb, and it's in between 16 or 17 tombs in the Valley of the Kings, and you will see all that hieroglyphic history and paintings, and really nothing to do with the Bible, but you can see it's 2000, 1500 before Christ. So it was very great civilization, and you can see they have picture of people handcuffed, not handcuffed, but they are tied, and they call them prisoners of wars that they got from maybe different nation or different parts, and they had prisons. They were imprisoned, but I don't know where or anything. But it's acceptable, really, especially knowing that the Roman and before them maybe the Greek, there was just more maybe information from other nations. No, actually, the Romans were not there, but yeah, they had civilization, they had workers and classes, and they had prisons. That's all what I can say.
And it does seem like they were putting the prisoners to work or something like that, because it does hint that Joseph was overseeing at least the operations of the prison. It is interesting that it mentions kind of that the prisoner, the captain of the guard, or the guy that was in charge, the jailer that was in charge of the prison, didn't have to do any work because Joseph was doing his job for him, essentially.
I smiled tonight for the first time when I heard that they did not just put him in prison. Potiphar put him in the king's prisoners, as if to say the king prisoner, they were in prison without trials. So that really says a question. I mean, was there trial? Did they have really to find if they are guilty or not? But it's interesting that he just put him in prison without a word of, any trials, and it's called prison of the king, as if to say there are other prison for just normal criminals. So
I'm sure that doesn't mean it was fancy.
Yeah.
no.
I'm surprised that his master believed his wife like that, because
yeah.
I mean, I feel like he must have seen his wife. I don't know.
I thought about that earlier too, and I wondered if he was just trying to save face. He knew she was a liar.
And she
That's good. That's a good point.
She lied kind of twice. I mean, she told everyone what he did, but then maybe when he did not take an action right away, she said, "That's how your slave treat me. That's how your slave treat us." Maybe it sounded like not the first thing she said about Joseph. It was maybe 10 minutes, an hour, something like that. But
yes,
as if he did not take an action, so she said, "So that's how he is going to treat." So, yeah.
and surely he had to know about her. And she probably already had done things like this with the lies.
Probably so, you would think.
And it didn't sound like he had other wives or many wives.
No, it didn't.
Exactly. So it means that, yeah, he will listen to her regardless if he believes her or not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
you would kind of be in an awkward spot if you didn't
yeah, exactly.
believe your wife. You would almost have to throw her out because you would.
Oh,
However, he had questions. Certainly, he had reasons
Yeah,
to keep Joseph was out of prison because he was doing the greatest job, being his agent or
Yeah.
the servant and his business manager. So, but
yeah. Didn't make
well, and
sense.
this does, this does also bring us back to pointing to the Messiah, which would be thousands of years after this. But when Jesus, well, not thousands, I think what was it, 1600 years, something
yeah.
like that.
Mm.
But Jesus was accused, well, falsely accused, and that's what happened to Joseph.
Mhm.
He was
Hmm.
But
falsely accused, and but even though these things happened to him, didn't I think it's kind of miraculous that Joseph was kept alive uh, for that long. I mean, if he was found guilty of what they were, imprisoned
That's
him
true.
for, you would think that so that it could be possible that maybe Potiphar, knew perhaps.
mm,
I don't know. Or if God just kept them from, because you could imagine him arriving at the prison, he gains the favor of the prison, the prison guard, but that wouldn't have happened right away. That would have taken a little bit of time to gain the trust of the guy in charge of the prison and for him to let you just kind of run things.
I think the answer to that is, and it's spoken in the verse, in a couple of places, it says so clearly, the Lord was with him. So the Lord was with
so
Joseph.
whatever he did, whatever he said, it was right.
Yeah.
He was, protected.
Yeah. I grew up wondering, what did Joseph say? What did Joseph think? Because if I'm in his place, I know that I'm innocent. I know if God is with me, and I know that God is with me. So after a day, after a week, the truth will be revealed. And a week becomes a month, then a month becomes 2, and 6 months. What did go in his mind? It's not that he was seeing dreams in prison. It's not that he saw an angel or anyone to tell him, "Don't worry, we know that you are innocent." He just was left there, and I wondered until I think I was fully grown here in this country when I learned that it's 13 years. So it's not just even a year. So there is really a lesson to learn for all of us with the faith, that if we have faith, we should continue regardless knowing for how long.
And even after he interpreted the two guys that
Yeah.
that come down into the prison in chapter 40, I think. The baker and the cupbearer of Pharaoh, they have dreams and he interprets them, and he tells the one. So the one of them does get a favorable interpretation, and that's the cupbearer, and he tells him, when you get out and you get restored to your position, remember me. And the cupbearer forgot, and Joseph was there another 2 years, kind of wondering, he might have had a glimmer of hope there, you would think, after
Yes.
after doing that. But yeah, I mean, and we have we of course can look at the story and we know he's going to get out, and but he, like you were saying, he was living all those months and years and not really just on faith, just trusting that God would get him through. You could possibly say that he could still have a sense that God was helping him through his situation, even though God didn't deliver him from the slavery and the prison right away. You would think he would have noticed kind of God acting. And it's interesting too how this mirrors how God acts in our lives in a lot of ways. There wasn't, at least it doesn't say that Joseph was doing anything really miraculous when he was in Potiphar's house or when he was in the prison. It just said that he was having success at whatever he was doing. So I guess none of the prisoners got food poisoning, or he kept the prison he kept the prison free of rats or whatever. But he balanced Potiphar's accounts and made good investments, maybe. So certainly successes that they added up over time. He could look and say, well, it is kind of clear that at least Potiphar knew. It said that Potiphar recognized that God's with this guy, and this guy, there's some power that is helping him be successful in all that he's doing. And it's also, I also want to note that it doesn't mention that Joseph, it does mention that he was well built, of course, and handsome, which is why Potiphar's wife noticed him. And he was probably intelligent. I mean, no doubt about that. But it's very clear that his success was not solely on his just being really smart. It was, God was helping him through these circumstances. I am reminded a little bit of people like Solomon and Daniel. I mean, Solomon, as it said later on, Solomon's much later, but God gave him wisdom and understanding that would be unequal. You do kind of wonder what that looked like, and he got some kind of infusion of wisdom and understanding. And Daniel also, Daniel later on in the Babylonian exile, he was he gained a lot of understanding and wisdom, and he was better than all the other. The king would have brought in the best and the brightest, or the emperor or whatever. So it's interesting how it's not his own doing, but God was helping him have the capacity to fulfill the role that he was in. So you could kind of see how this really relates to us today, right? Because we find ourselves in, sometimes like Solomon, we're in a good situation. Solomon was the king, and I mean he was young and he became the king, and he asked for wisdom and understanding. Daniel was from a noble family, but he was essentially he became a slave, and he was in exile, and but then you have Joseph here. God made sure that he was in that he went through those 13 years, but God also helped him through that. We can find ourselves in situations, they might not last years like this, but whether it's a job, whether it's, and it's easy to say kind of abstractly, when it's not us going through it, but there can be certain circumstances that, we might wonder why, especially if we didn't do anything wrong, or we feel like we didn't do anything to deserve whatever is happening to us. We could wonder why God is letting us go through that situation. And
one of the simplest I just noticed when you mentioned similarity between Daniel and Joseph, I thought it's unfair and unjust to be in prison, and certainly it's unfair and unjust to be for many years. So at least maybe God should have helped them to get out after 6 months. And
Yeah.
maybe also it's fair and good for if God did not allow Daniel's to be taken as a prisoner. But yet, to be taken as a prisoner like Daniel, it allowed him the chance to be the prime minister and the second one after the king. And after 13 years was taken out, Joseph was taken out with the chance to be a prime minister of Egypt. So really it shows what you are saying, that just sometimes it takes that long in history, it takes that chance to be a prisoner or just a prisoner without a cause. So that gives us patience if we are suffering from injustice and just cannot help it.
And something else to consider is that, well, Joseph did kind of briefly, well, he met his father halfway, I guess, on the way back, but he never really went back home. Just like Daniel, as far as we know, Daniel never went back, even though he was. So he was kind of the rest of his life. He was in, Daniel, the rest of his life, he was in Babylon, and Joseph, the rest of his life, he spent in Egypt. So probably not what he thought he would be doing. But
I have to question about Joseph. Who is his mom? Was it Rachel or Rebecca?
Rachel.
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 Yeah.
It was Rachel.
Somehow I heard.
And Bilhah and Zilpah were the servants of Rebecca and Leah.
Yeah. Second question: how old was Joseph when he died later?
110.
Wow. Yeah. So he lived in Egypt maybe 90 years.
Well, actually, I do stand corrected on one thing. He didn't he go back to bury his father?
Yes, I think yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And the Egyptians were sent with him.
Yeah. But when Joseph died, he died in Egypt, and he was. I think it mentions later on that he was embalmed or something. I guess they mummified him or something.
Yes, for a month.
So his father never learned that he did not die?
Well, later on, they'll be reunited later on.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay.
Yeah.
But
He
right
will
before
get all his father and brothers and their family, then everyone will move. I think 70 something total of family members will move to Egypt.
Yeah.
because there's a famine that's about to happen that'll kind of drive everybody to Egypt, because that's the only place that'll have any kind of food that you can purchase.
So is
As usual.
So I did want to, well, there's a lot of uncertainty in the story of Joseph in these times, not just him being sold as a slave and then being thrown into prison and not knowing how long he's going to be there, but you also have this this famine that comes about, which I keep saying we'll talk about that next time, but it is a story, so it all kind of connects. We often think we live in the only uncertain time. That our time certainly does have a lot of things that are, conflicts and, what's going to happen with, how are the large language models and the AI going to fit into the workforces, and what are people going to be doing, and all these.
Well, I think it is true that the speed of change is something which only increases the rate of change. So we do live in the fastest changing time to ever exist. as far as humans are concerned.
Yeah.
And we think we did so far. I think it will go faster and faster. I remember having that big thing on my shoulder, the camcorder, then the big thing for camera to take a picture of our son. Nowadays, no one has camera, and that's all in 40 years. So now
Yep.
is a change of watches and gadgets. And amazing how fast those things change.
It is.
Yeah, and I mean we don't, and even with the things that like the tech that we can observe how it's advancing, there are events that happen. I mean, of course, lately, I mean, there's things that never thought would happen, but I was thinking about this the other day because I heard it somewhere, and I was like, yeah, that is the case. 2020, March of 2020 was 6 years ago. And I remember, I don't know if it feels like it was like long ago or not that long ago. I mean, but it's just weird to think that it was 6 years ago. I remember what things were like right before that and kind of going into it, and what we know now, and it's just kind of crazy to see how much you don't know.
Why did you mention March 20?
Oh, the pandemic.
Advent of COVID.
Oh,
COVID, yeah.
okay, yeah. Wow.
I remember when I had pictures actually in my phone. It'll say 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and we were having.
March 20.
I was teaching in school actually, and we were, and then I had the Bible study. We were meeting during the week, like,
from Egypt in February.
I remember we were showing that series that went through, went through the Holy Land, the different sites. I don't know if you remember that. I had it projected on the screen in the sanctuary. Your wife. But anyway, it was just kind of like, I just remember the mindset at that time. We just didn't know. I knew that there was this virus out there that they were talking about. Then all of a sudden went from like something over there to like the end of everything. It's the bubonic plague, and everybody's gonna, it's conflicting information left and right. It was, but and then just how it transformed everything, and how people thought about different things. Just it totally. But you would have never seen that in 2019. You would have never guessed. Guessed any of that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
But so I mean, it is always kind of uncertain. There's always all this uncertainty, and the comforting thing though is at least if you look at the example of Joseph, he had this.
Imagine being born or being 2 or something when that plague, whatever plague, virus hit.
Yeah.
And for a couple of years, that would be like the formative, your first kind of memories, and it's like that's how the world is, and then all of a sudden it's not. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So it makes us, if you see Star Wars, anything like that, you will say, "Oh, it's in the movie." With I don't know who the generation, our grandchildren, or what. So sooner more than later, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
Would there?
Yeah. No. I mean, well, I'd get us off topic here, but anyway, it's only going to keep speeding up.
Yeah.
I can tell.
So I mean, not only do you have the accelerating change, but you have these events that happen. I was in high school when 9/11 happened, and freshman in high school, but and I got to see all that play out, and the ramifications and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's just kind of crazy to think about these things. But Joseph, I guess something we can gain from Joseph's story is that he, God did work through humbling him through this time and transforming his character. I mean, yeah, I guess you could say he was kind of good character early on. So maybe that wasn't all of it, but he was doing a good job for Potiphar, and he resisted the advances of Potiphar's wife, even though he would have been like an 18-year-old guy at the time. That so he wasn't not to say that he had a bad character or anything like that early on, but um you can just see that he had these dreams, and he had this. You get the sense that he had this faith throughout, that even though all this was happening, that somehow God would work it out, and God did work it out.
He was good growing up when his father told him, your brothers are there, take the food and go to them. Right away, he said, here I am. So he was
Yeah.
obedient, he was good. But about the dreams, I mean, certainly, did he tell his family all his dreams? I mean, and if he see dreams like that, because the two dreams he told them about are very, really unique. But
Yeah.
he did not believe it. If he believed it, maybe he would not have said it. He would have at least maybe thought about it more. But now we know that he saw the dreams and it became true. So I wonder,
Yeah.
did he believe that it's going to happen or not? Or I
Well,
don't think he did.
well, that is interesting too. That kind of validates the whole
Mhm.
vision that he had, that he told them. You could say, because he could have said later on, like, because later on his brothers do end up, like the sheep. What was one of his dream was like the sheaves bowed down to
Uh-huh.
his sheaf.
Yes.
Um, so later on, you do have that scene where his brothers end up bowing down to him because he's the king. Well, he's
Yeah.
essentially the ruler of Egypt, but they didn't know it when they saw him. So it was kind of a prophecy in a way that came true. Um,
Yes.
so it wouldn't hit as much if he told them later on, like, "Hey, actually, I dreamed about this, but I didn't tell you at the time." But
Yeah.
the fact that he was younger, and he told them. But it also kind of it is kind of proof that he said that he had the dreams, because that was the motive for them throwing him in the pit in the first place.
So if he was 30 when he got out of prison, then 7 good years, 37, then the beginning of the 7 bad years. So he will have been maybe 40 when 40 years old when his brothers came
Yeah,
to buy seeds, to buy wheat.
yeah. So he was younger than 17 when he had the dreams,
Oh, exactly.
and he was close to 40 when they kind of
Oh,
finally.
40 or more because by
Yeah,
got hungry. Yes. Wow.
yeah.
So 25 years maybe
Wow.
Wow.
or more between seeing the dreams and the dreams coming true.
Mm,
Maybe, yeah, 38, 37,
yeah.
which makes it the difference between just the dreams that we have after eating heavy dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This might be a little bit of a sidetrack, but and we could have read the chapters later, but I didn't want us to have too. I'm going to kind of break this up into three parts. Joseph's story into three parts. But he marries the person that Pharaoh ends up giving him it as his wife. Uh, the daughter of Potiphar. So I know there's something to, like, yeah, I have wondered why is Potiphar's name mentioned, like, because usually people like this, it's not usually don't get a name, like Pharaoh is not named. The captain of the guard, the guy in charge of the jail isn't named. Potiphar's wife isn't named.
Yeah.
Well, she's Potiphar's wife, but it mentions Potiphar here. That it explicitly says Potiphar was the Egyptian that bought Joseph from the Ishmaelites, and then later on he marries. Was it Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar? Potiphar? Is that
But
the
may
priest
not
of
be,
law?
A different person.
yeah, may not be
Also,
the same guy who bought him.
Or it's a similar root, right? I just didn't know if that was like a common name,
seems to be there.
Not now.
Potiphar, a name.
Believe it or not, I have a distant cousin, not distant, yeah, a cousin, Egyptian cousin, who lives now in Austria. Her name is Asnet.
Oh,
After this, but not, I mean, it's an uncommon name, but still names come out of the Bible, even if it's foreign names in the Bible. Yeah. And I thought the guy he married, his daughter, was one of the like priests of the gods there.
Yeah.
So Potiphar is a male, right?
Yeah.
He was the
Potiphar, yeah.
priest of On.
Priest of On.
Unless
so it's a priest of
Potiphar,
God.
I would have thought it was a female, but I'm wrong. It's the
Potiphar
male.
is the male, yeah.
Yeah.
Potiphar. Well, I did see just in my searches that Potif is like they do share the same root,
So
but the ending's different. The Potiphar means something like the dedicated to Ra or something like that, and then so I guess it's hard to say, but I just didn't know if you happen to know of any difference in those.
Ra was the sun god, right?
Yeah, Ra.
yes. Yeah. What's interesting really when you visit these historical Egyptian temples and so on, you look for Bible-rooted or Christian-rooted history. You don't see it, but certainly you see the Ra, just very, very famous statues. Actually, I know the way the sun and God of Sun, and
and Joseph gets renamed, right? He's Pharaoh renames Joseph
correct.
Zaphenath Paneah. So doesn't say what that means, but
No.
Huh.
But I often think, maybe this. So he gets like nice clothes and
A haircut and
a haircut and
yes, true. Because imagine him in prison, as you were saying, just
yeah.
beard for 13 years, and
Yeah. And apparently he looks enough like just a regular Egyptian that his brothers don't recognize him later on. So.
especially with clothes and they didn't even get close to see his eyes until he brought them back.
So I do kind of, it's interesting how Joseph gets, when he gets restored later on, that he gets kind of everything that, nicer clothes than the clothes of many colors. And apparently this, I'm assuming the woman that Pharaoh arranges for him to marry was like somebody that everybody wanted to marry. I would assume, she was. But anyway.
Okay, I have a question for you Bible scholars. Okay.
So,
Okay, so it was mentioned that we didn't know the name of Potiphar's wife. So I Googled it, of course, taking the hint from Maureen. And it says Potiphar's wife, also known as Zuleika, Zuleikha, is a figure in the Hebrew Bible and the Quran. She was the wife of Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard in the time of Jacob and his 12 sons. And it also goes on to say that the Bible doesn't record what happened to Potiphar and his wife, after Joseph was imprisoned, leaving their fate ambiguous. However, Jewish tradition offers legends suggesting divine punishment, with some tales claiming Potiphar was castrated by angels, while others mention his wife was afflicted with boils, serving as a moral warning against lust.
Huh.
Oh my God.
So here's my question.
Yikes.
So this Google knows the name of Potiphar's wife, but if it's not in the Bible, where did they get this information? If it's not in the Bible, is it in the Dead Sea Scrolls somewhere? Or
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
probably in one of those writings, like, I mean, like the Book of Enoch gives a lot of extra. The Book of Enoch wouldn't have talked about this, but like you have
yeah.
a lot of books that didn't.
There are a lot of extra Jewish writings.
Okay.
A lot of them.
Okay. Well, I'm sure. Okay, that makes sense. And I believe we've talked about that even here before, about all these Jewish writings that multiple rabbit holes you could go down and find out all kinds of good stuff. So, okay, that was my question.
Some of them mesh a little bit better than others with the gospel message. I guess it'd be the way, because there are those ones that say, like,
What did they say?
the Jews are going to enslave.
The priest of On.
We're going to be slaves or something. So I mean, it is kind of, take it with a grain of salt. There are certain passages
Or
that, that
Okay.
have been used for like
No.
more of a identity sort of thing. I don't want to get over my skis here with this, but then there are other writings that are a little more like, the Book of Enoch, for example, that do offer some useful explanations into like exactly what was going on behind the scenes, at least. And I think Enoch was in the Dead Sea Scrolls collection, right? Wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
I know they have the Isaiah was in there, right?
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Sorry. Sorry.
There you have it, huh?
Yeah. Well, hopefully nobody comes after me for saying it.
You're saying what?
Saying what?
Exactly.
What'd you say?
For saying that the Jews are going to enslave us all?
Well, aren't there passages like in the Talmud that talk that you could interpret or have been interpreted that way? I think that talk about like.
I'm not sure, but I do know that there's a lot of documentation out there that could
There's, like,
have in a different
Kabbalah
time, in a different
tradition.
universe, been part of the Bible or something, but it seems to have been filtered.
Sonia, my cousin in Sweden. That's her sister.
The universe was filtered?
He lives in
In a different timeline, perhaps.
Oh. Okay.
There's a lot of different stuff out there that could have been part of the Bible that isn't.
Yeah.
That has been filtered by one method or another.
Okay, yeah, I buy that. I've heard that before too.
Well, and you have ones like Enoch that are certain churches. I think the church in Ethiopia, there's the church in Ethiopia that one of the branches that has Enoch in its Bible, but they also have a few other books in there. But Jesus does reference Enoch, so that does give it some. Enoch is referenced by the Bible. So it's considered one of those books that is kind of in like a gray area, that it's. But
What does the Old Testament say? Who is Enoch?
Enoch was in Genesis chapter 3.
So he is one of Adam's sons, or was he taken up to heaven before dying, or
he was one of the few humans who did not
that we don't know their
die
death?
physically?
Yeah.
He was taken
Mhm.
As a good thing or a bad thing?
As a good thing.
If you-
Genesis 5.
He was the son of Jared and the father of Methuselah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
Walked
Why is
with
it
God, and he
Genesis
was
5, verse 22?
through 24. But it said that he walked with God, and then God took him.
Seems like I always remember, and Enoch walked with God.
Enoch walked with God,
yeah. With God.
implying like a relational closeness.
Mm.
And he was kind of around the time of. He was right before. Well, his lifespan overlapped with Noah, I do believe, because in the book of Enoch they mention there's mention about Noah being warned about the flood and but Enoch is not. It seems like he was taken somewhere that he was not on earth. He was in. He was with God in the special place.
Genesis 5:22 says Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, it took him 300 years of walking to get there.
Yeah.
I wonder how many
That's not
steps.
original-
How many
it's not
steps is
original
that?
statement.
Many steps. Well, if you do 15,000 steps a day, that's
Exactly.
maybe he was wearing a pedometer.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a lot about the story of Joseph that we'll continue to see that really, I mean, it's a great story, just not just with the content of it, but just in the encouraging nature of it and how it mirrors a lot of the, well, not exactly, because we don't, unless you do get thrown into prison for being falsely accused of trying to sleep with your master's wife, but you do find yourself in these circumstances, even if you're even if you haven't, it's not necessarily that you've done something wrong that you end up in but God can be with you still, even in circumstances that you might not want to be in, that you might be in temporarily.
Just like Paul was in prison,
Paul was in
but
prison.
God was with him the whole time.
Yeah.
The verse that comes to my mind is what Paul said. If we live, to God we live. If we die, to God we die. For Christ, actually, he did not say for.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
And something interesting about Paul, as you mentioned it, he was when he was in prison in Rome, he was in wasn't the people that guarded him were the Praetorian Guard, right? So he was kind of in the, so he was talking, he was there, so he was kind of witnessing to the
Yes.
Mhm.
Rome was an empire by then, yeah. So he was witnessing to the emperor's court, essentially, by being there in the close proximity to. So very similar to being in the king's prison, you could think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Felix.
Paul was essentially in the king's
Wasn't he like handcuffed to a guard?
Yeah.
You have to wonder what in the that terrible must that be for both individuals.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh.
So he had a captive audience. I think he mentions that he
that would hurt.
These guards had to listen to him talk,
and pray.
And pray.
One of the governor, I think, who liked him and actually was waiting for Paul to bribe him so he can let him go. I think his name was Felix, and he used to bring him so he can talk to him about Jesus, about Christ. And at one point, that's mentioned in Acts, he told him, he said, "Are you telling me to be Christian?" Paul said, "Yes, I will do anything for you to be Christian." And I think it's either it said it or you can get the sense that he was just not being Christian, but he did not know to believe it or not. He started having doubts about not believing, so he sent him back to prison. So that was his choice.
Yeah.
So yeah, certainly he affected many of his guards and rulers who were trying him. And I think he was favored. Actually, he was in the ship one time, and uh, they favored him, and he saved the whole ship by telling, "Don't kill yourself because we will see land." So, yeah, it's just amazing because really, if we know that God is with us, that's all what we need to know. Then really, even if we continue being in prison, if we continue being sick, if we see that we are about to die, just, it will be acceptable. So that takes faith, I think.
Yeah. And something to think about with Paul, because we're given all these different examples of how people are transformed. Paul it was one of those very instant kind of things. He had a vision, and it was very fast, his transformation. Although he was still kind of the same guy, he was very zealous in following what he thought was the Pharisee. He was a Pharisee, and he was trying to follow the law and be a good Jewish guy. And but then he was knocked off his, was it a horse or a donkey or a donkey, right?
Horse or so.
But Joseph's, you have the example of Joseph and Moses, that people that many years, you have this long kind of arc of transformation. Moses was 80 before he was really doing the, well, I guess you could say he was doing the work that God wanted him to do when he was a shepherd and when he was in Pharaoh's house. But, he was 80 before he actually started the whole Exodus thing, that he's going to Pharaoh and the plagues and, all that.
Saul/Paul brings up to the surface a question you were asking, William, because Maureen keeps asking it. I mean, God was with Joseph, God was with Daniel, and God was with Saul. He appeared to Saul to become Paul. I mean, why did he choose Saul? Why did he choose Saul to convert him in believing? And, in the middle of maybe 100,000 or millions of people who don't like Saul. So I don't know. But Maureen keeps asking, why does God, why does he choose some people? So I don't know, but certainly sometimes you wonder.
I can certainly see God choosing him, at least because he was very laser focused. Well, earlier it wasn't for good, but then he turned it.
Yeah, so he was as bad as he was. He became that much good. Just a transition.
And something to think about, I guess, kind of a question to, you have these, come back to these coats or these garments that were being removed and kind of the symbolism there. And I did find a question that I thought, I'd mention it, because it's a good question to ask about this. What are the coats and the garments in this case were kind of symbols of security and favor and, things we might be holding on to. How can we, there's just kind of something to keep in mind, just, that as the difference between relying on those things and, trusting in God's presence no matter what circumstance or what you're wearing. Joseph had, at the beginning of the story, he had a nice coat with sleeves in many colors, and then he was wearing whatever he wore in Potiphar's house, and that he got taken from him, and then he was in the prison probably in kind of loincloth or something, or rags. I don't know what the. And then he was clothed in all this royal stuff that Pharaoh gave him. So, but still, God was with him through all of those circumstances, even though the outer stuff that he was wearing, changed. So just something to think about. And anything else? And I'm sure, well, there were a few things that were mentioned that we'll be mentioning again, because we'll be continuing this story. At least one more part, but probably two more parts. And him being becoming the equal to Pharaoh here shortly, and reconciled with his brothers, and the statement he makes there, and what happens after that. So that's what we'll be going through, but we'll be sticking to the series, but we'll just kind of finish up Joseph's story.
Clock's ahead tonight.
Like the head?
No, clocks are turned ahead tonight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought
Technically,
you were
it's
talking
10
about
till 11.
That was...
It's 10 to 11?
Well,
Oh, yikes. Well, I guess we better get going.
Yeah, we need to wrap it up. I got to go to bed.
All right, well,
Saying here.
well, Bill hasn't told us to live long and prosper yet, so we're...
Hurry up,
Yeah.
Bill.
Well, I guess we need to hurry and live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.